Hello and welcome. It was Financial Modeling World Cup weekend this weekend, and I'm making the slightly unusual and somewhat risky move of recording my solution video for the big question, Case 3, Race to the Bottom, by Michael Jarman, all about debt sculpting, before the solution model comes out, which has some risk of coming back to kick me in the butt. But uh, I know a lot of people, including myself, struggled with this one, so I figured it would be good to get a solution video out as soon as we were sort of out of embargo time. So I'm recording this Monday night, planning to put it up Tuesday morning. So quick introduction to the case. If you haven't seen it, like I said, it's all about debt sculpting, an unusually simple setup and set of assumptions. So we have just a model start date, 24 months of construction, and then 24, I think that's supposed to say 25, actually, I think that was a typo. 25 years of operations. Um, and we have down here, this is the CapEx spend by month for those first 24 months during construction. And then we have a 6 monthly view after that. And this is our cash flow available for debt services once we get into the operating period. So we spend all this money building something, and then we make all this money running it. And the question is mostly about debt, obviously. So we've got these kind of two test banks to set things up, and then 10 other banks uh, with various excellent pun names. And so for each bank, we've got an interest rate during the construction phase, where the interest is capitalized, an interest rate during the operations phase, um, where the interest gets paid, obviously. We've got an upfront arrangement fee as a percent of the total amount. So obviously, it's a construction style loan, so we're going to be drawing as we build. So the loan won't be fully drawn until sometime into the 2-year construction phase, or possibly right at the end. But we've got an arrangement fee as a percent of the total amount drawn, and then a commitment fee on the undrawn balance up until the loan is fully drawn. Then we've got a tail, meaning the number of months before the end of operations that the debt has to be repaid by, varies by bank. So the most generous Nairn LB will allow you to kind of keep repaying the debt right up until the end of operations. The strictest West Jack requires it to be paid off 5 years before operations finish. Then we've got a debt service coverage ratio. So basically, how much of this cash flow available for debt service are you allowed to use to pay for debt service? Then we've got debt service reserve account and debt service reserve financing, I think, DSRF and DSRA. Um, so DSRA basically meaning you need to reserve the largest debt service amount you're going to have in any 6-month period of operations. You need to put that in an account at the end of the construction period, and it doesn't get released until the end of the loan life, so before the tail kicks in. And then we've got a drawdown order. So, we've got a certain amount that we can fund based on what we're capable of paying back from the CFADs. Um, and yeah, basically that will be less than all of the capex that we can afford to fund, and so the rest is going to have to come from equity. But so the three different options are senior first, basically meaning you fund these capex amounts plus any capitalized interest and fees like the arrangement fee and commitment fee from senior debt until you max out the senior debt, and then pay everything from equity after that until the end of construction. Or senior last, meaning you pay from equity until you're ready to do everything else from senior debt. And then pari passu, meaning just they pay equal shares. So, it could be 50-50 or 75-25 coming from debt and from equity. And then we're also interested in the later questions in clubs of banks. So for the later questions, we might not be able to get enough from any one bank, and so we'll have to put together a club. So maybe we club the first 3 banks together, and in that situation you get the worst terms of all three. So you get the highest interest rate in construction, highest interest rate in operations, highest fees, longest tail, highest debt service coverage ratio. And then I spent this one was fairly intuitive to me that, you know, senior first was the best from an equity returns perspective and senior last was the worst. This one was not intuitive to me. There was actually something written in the question to say, for the avoidance of doubt, DSRA is worse than DSRF, but I spent a while trying to like intuit that. It does kind of make intuitive sense, but anyway, I was stressed and making bad decisions. So, all right, so that's what the original model looked like. I'm going to work from a version that I've made a few kind of tweaks to, just so that you don't have to watch me do all the most boring stuff. So main thing is I've got a kind of skeleton set up here just to speed me along, but also I've got a bank selector here, which is reflected in, you know, the highlighting here and in the values that come through here. But also I have the option to make this be something like just a number code, and then it'll tell me, okay, that's picking up the first 3 banks. It ignores the test banks for these club scenarios. The first 3 banks, it lists the banks here, and then it's just doing like max ifs and other things to figure out what are the worst terms across those banks. All right, now the instructions to this question said you will almost certainly have to make your model circular, and I did. When I was building it, I built a terrible model, made it circular, tried to solve it with GoldSeek. Turns out GoldSeek doesn't play nice with circular, so I ended up like basically doing the hand crank version of GoldSeek. Very sad, very unimpressive performance by me. But anyway, part of my aim for today is to do a fully non-circular version, because there are nice ways to think about present value factors and other things that allow you to, well, basically allow you to make this be pretty non-circular. So that's a lot of preamble, and I don't want this video to last forever, and I've got a lot of stuff to fill in here, so let's get going. First, I'm just going to put in the period number, and these periods are not all the same length, but I'm going to use it as a counter anyway. So just 1 to 74, so we got 24 monthly periods and then 56 monthly periods. So then I want a construction flag, and that can just be minus minus. This is less than or equal to the 24 assumption here. It looks like text, but it's not. It's a number. Or equally, I guess that could have just been this is greater than 0. But anyway, whatever. That's construction. Then the tail is going to be the tail is in months, but the periods at the end are in 6 months. So it's just going to be this greater than or equal to 74 minus the tail divided by 6. I'll make that one also a minus minus. No. Yes? Wait, is this one? Oh yeah, this club has a very long tail, 36 months, which is 3 years to do. Okay, so you're off by, sorry, this needs to be greater than. Not greater than or equal to, but otherwise we're good. So yes, 36 months tail. That works. Okay. Then the 3360 allocation is just going to be, if we are in construction, then it's 1/12, otherwise it's a half. In other words, in construction we're in monthly, and in operations we're in 6 monthly. Now, the interest, I'm going to play with a slightly different version of the construction period interest rate here, and that's a way of navigating a circularity challenge. So the interest rate, and I'll show you this in a minute, will be very naturally dealt with by the present value factor. The arrangement fee is kind of easy enough to navigate. The commitment fee without circularity is a bit of a challenge, because the commitment fee is on your undrawn balance. What's going to be easier to work with, instead of saying we've got a 4% interest on the drawn balance and a 1.5% interest on the undrawn balance, it's going to be easier to work with saying we have a 1.5% fee on everything and an additional 2.5% fee on the drawn balance. And that still works out as 4% on what's drawn, 1.5% on what's undrawn. But I'm going to use this what I've just kind of labeled the modified interest rate. In other words, the construction interest rate minus the commitment fee as my interest rate, and I'm going to roll the rest of the interest rate, the 1.5% on what's drawn, into the commitment fee, and therefore this commitment fee can be calculated on the full balance. That's just going to make my calculations a little easier. So interest then is going to be, if we are in construction, then this 2.5%, otherwise the operations rate times the allocation factor here. So that 2.5% divided by 12 gets you 0.2, blah, blah, blah. And then over here, the 4.25 divided by 2 gets you 2.125. Okay. Then the present value factor. So I'm just going to start with 1 in the first period, and then for every other period, I'm going to say this divided by 1 plus the interest rate. And so the idea here is, if I make a $1 payment at the end of the second period, what's that worth at the end of the first period? It's worth 99.79 cents. If I make a $1 payment, way out here at the end of December 2043, that's worth 48 cents, 48.64 cents in terms of the original money, because that's how much the interest has increased it by. So in other words, if I borrowed $1 here and then if I borrowed, I should say 48 cents, wherever my example was, if I borrow 48 cents right back at the start and don't pay it back until here, I'll have to pay back $1. This present value factor is very handy for if you're working with mortgage payments. You can use the PMT formula to calculate a regular payment, but if you have payments of variable length or variable interest rate or anything like that, because you can say this is the value of, toward the original balance, this is the value of $1 paid in this period, in this period, in this period, in this period, you can basically say, okay, well then the value of $1 paid in each of these periods is going to be whatever, 29.18, and so my mortgage payment is just going to be my opening balance divided by that 29.18. But in this case, we're not dealing with mortgages, so it's going to be a little bit different. But we'll come back to that. So next thing is the debt service. And the debt service is just going to be, it is going to be the cash flow available for debt service divided by the debt service coverage ratio, which is right here. Well, let's just copy that across first and we can look at it. So here, for example, we have $14 million available for debt service, but we need to have a coverage ratio of 1.6, which means that the debt service is only going to be 8.75. But the additional twist is we can't use any of this money in the tail period for debt service, so we also have to multiply by 1 minus the tail flag. And so that zeroes out those ones. And now, if you think about it, if you think about each of these debt service amounts times these present value factors, that is the value at the starting period of dollars paid in each of these periods. And so that if you kind of discount that back to here, or ideally back to here, the end of the construction period, then you get the value of the maximum loan that you can afford to pay with these debt service payments. So let me just do that. Say sum of this times this. So that will give you, oops, I must have had it in a different cell before because I did have all my formats set up, but never mind. So that will give you the greatest amount that you could borrow right here if it accumulated interest over all that time and then paid off. But what I'm interested in is the maximum amount that I could borrow at the end of the construction period, because the interest before that is going to capitalize into the loan or be paid by equity. So I'm going to divide by the present value factor here at the end of the construction period, and that is going to be my real max loan balance. Okay. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is work out the fees, meaning the arrangement fee and the commitment fee, which now that we have the total, the max loan balance, and remember the whole idea of sculpting is we're going to make the debt as big as it can be to be paid off by what's available for debt service subject to the debt service coverage ratio. So this is the size of the loan, which means the arrangement fee is now just the size of the loan times 1%. And the commitment fee, we don't have to work out all the interim balances at this point because remember we've said we're shifting 1.5% from the regular construction interest rate into the commitment fee so that this 1.5% applies to the entire balance. So we're going to say if we are in construction, then it's going to be the commitment fee times the proration times the balance. I'll copy that across. Oh, sorry. Otherwise 0. So when you see a false appear like that, that's just the default value of an if you haven't told it what to do if false. So that just means we need to put in otherwise 0. Okay. Now the debt service reserve account, if we need to go there, is going to be a function of the biggest debt service we'll need to pay in any 6-month period. And we've already worked out our debt services here, so it's just the max of those. So it's going to be if, let's just do a DSRA active flag here. So we'll say minus minus this equals DSRA. Then we're going to say if, so we'll fund the debt service reserve account in the last period of construction. So we're going to say if construction times 1 minus next period. In other words, if we're in construction, but the next period is not construction, which is to say we're in the last period of construction, and if we are in the land of debt service reserve account, because this will sometimes be DSRF or none in the case of the test banks. So if that's true, then I just want the max of the debt service line. Sorry, I need to lock this because I'm going to copy across. Otherwise 0. So we copy that across, and oh, I guess I haven't fully deleted this. So okay, then the debt service reserve account gets released at the end of the loan, meaning immediately before the tail kicks in. So similar to the logic for looking for when this transitions from a 1 to a 0, we're looking for when this transitions from a 0 to a 1. So we'll say if debt service reserve account times, so we have to not be in the tail, so 1 minus tail, but the next period has to be in the tail. So that. If all those things are met, then we say minus the max debt service. We're just releasing the same amount, otherwise 0. Copy that across, and so here at the end of the tail, we release that that debt service reserve account. Okay, so then our total draws during the construction period is going to be this is the total draws between equity and debt. So equity and debt between them are going to pay for capex, they're going to pay for the fees, and they're going to pay for funding the debt service reserve account. I'm not including interest here because I'm dealing with interest through the present value factor for now. And then those draws we only really need out as far as the end of construction, although I guess a more sensible thing would be to just say if construction, then that, otherwise 0, and then we can copy the same formula all the way across. Okay, and then I want the present value of those draws, which is just going to be this times that present value factor. And so the idea is we're going to be able to say, okay, for the 3 different ways we want to think about funding, depending on whether it's senior first, senior last, or pari passu, which I thought would be the easiest one, but turned out to be the hardest one. More on that in a minute. We'll be able to look at the buildup of these present values and how it compares to our max loan amount. So let's start with the senior first. So what I'm interested in is senior first basically means we're going to be accumulating these until we get to these many dollars, and then we have to stop, and everything after that has to be funded by equity. So I'm interested in the present value of the draws up to now, and that's going to be the sum of this. So I selected F3, then put the semicolon, and that made it into the range F23 to F23. Then I'm just going to lock that. So that's the present value as of like everything fixed on this date, but to make it the present value as of the period I'm in, I'm going to divide by that period's present value factor. So in other words, the draws in the first period come to 52 million. The present value of draws up to now are 52 million. In the next period, this is going to have been kind of increased by the interest rate, and then we add these additional draws and we carry that on across. And obviously anything beyond construction is irrelevant. But we're interested in the point where this crosses 330 million. So we'll come over here. Here. So everything up to here, if we're thinking senior first, we can afford to fund from senior debt. But here we can't. 350 million is too much because our max is 330. So we want to get to here and then fund a tiny little bit of that last one. I'm just glancing at a quick check. Yes. Okay. So let's do this then. So what percent? So these are the three different things I've got. Percent senior for the three different scenarios, and then whichever one is active, and then that'll drive everything else. So senior first. Let's look at that one, and let's come out to this period where it crosses over. So we're going to say we are going to say the present value of everything up to now is this amount, and so we should be able to say how much are we going to, what percent are we going to fund in this period of this 23 million whatever, and that should be this minus this. So in other words, from the starting point, where can we get to? We can go up by whatever, a little over 2 million as a percent of this minus this. And that gives us 9%. So that would say in this period, you can afford to draw 9% of these total draws and still, plus everything that has come before, and you'll get to this 330 million. And then if I copy that, to either side, sorry, I gotta lock this, otherwise it will not behave. Then this would say, here you can afford more than 100%, here you can afford less than 0%. But if I just wrap that in a median of 0 and this and 1, then it'll give me, here the middle value is the 9%, here it's flooring it at 0, here it's capping it at 100%. So that, with no circularity, is the percent of my draws that I can afford to fund in the senior first view. So for the first 19 months, I can fully fund from senior, and then I can fund 9% of the draws in the 20th month. And then after that, the other kind of 90-ish% of this has to come from equity, and all the last few months have to be fully funded by equity. Okay, so now let's do a similar thing for senior last. So to do this, I'm interested in the present value of future draws at the end of construction. So you think about senior last, you want to say, maybe the first few periods will be funded by equity, and then we'll start paying everything else, accumulating everything else into the senior debt. And so what I'm interested in is what is the value of all of these future draws up to the end of construction. What is the value of that shifted forward to the end of construction, because when the value of all the payments yet to come accrued up to that point becomes at least as big as this, that's when, becomes at least as small as this, that's when we're ready to start funding everything through debt. So, similar formula to here, except this time we're going to go out to the end of construction, or I guess we can go out to the end of forever, it doesn't really matter. We're going to lock that, and then we're going to divide by the present value factor at the end of construction, which I guess I should really get by indexing so that the 24 is a variable, but whatever, I don't care. We are not, in this case, asked to change that, so I'm not going to. Okay, so again, here we can come along and say, okay, if I wanted to kind of put all of these into the debt, then the debt by the end of construction would be 470 million. Can't afford that. If I wanted to go from here, 416, can't afford that. So I've got to go along until we find one right here where we can say, okay, we can afford this. So we could put everything from the December payment onward, or the December draw, which includes the commitment fee as well as the capex. Everything from December on we could put into the debt, and then we could do a little bit of November. So how do we think about what we can do of November? Similar idea to before. We're going to say the loan balance minus this amount here divided by this minus this amount here. Yeah. Sorry, put it in the wrong place. So my senior last to be down here, and then it'll be formatted correctly. Okay, and then I just need to add some checks to figure out if we're in the right period. So basically I want to say if this is greater than the loan and if this is less than the loan, then we're working. So we're going to say if this is greater than this lock, and this is less than this lock, and I'm missing a bracket here, then give me this calculation. What am I trying to say? I guess I want to say if it's greater than, then I want a new if to say if it's also less than. Now I've got too many brackets, but never mind. So if it's also less than, then it's going to be this in between thing, otherwise 1. And if it's not greater than, it's going to be 0. I think I did that right. Let's see. It should go to 0 there. No, sorry, I did it wrong. Because for the equity one, it should be 0 before and 100 after. Because this is senior last, meaning as soon as you start paying things on the senior debt, you never stop. And that should really only come out to the end of construction. So let's also say if construction, not that it gets used later than that, but if construction, all that stuff. Ugh, otherwise 0. All right, so now we've got something working for this, and it tells us exactly how much, again, without any circularity, we can afford to draw. The most tricky one, it turned out, is the one that I thought was going to be easiest, which is pari passu. So my thought on this was, if you throw everything into debt, then you will have this much debt at the end of the period, and so you should just be able to say this as a proportion of this is the proportion that you can afford to put into debt. And that's almost right, but it's not right, and here's why. If you said, okay, equity will pay some proportion of the capex and debt will pay some proportion of the capex, and then once something is in capex, all the interest has to accumulate to the debt, then it would be straightforward and it would just be a ratio like that. But as well as equity paying a proportion of the capex, equity is paying a proportion of the interest on the debt. And what that means is that instead of just being, a straight scale up or down, multiply everything by the sort of by the percent, the pari passu percent, say that 10 times fast. Instead of that, you get an adjusted interest rate that's also a function of this pari passu percent. And so basically, instead of being a linear equation, it's a 24th degree polynomial because you've got 24 different periods, and the compounding is this times the interest rate to the power of different amounts. So long story short, you cannot do a sort of pure mathematical solution to that because beyond, I think, cubics or quartics or fourth or fifth order polynomials, there's not a straightforward mathematical solution. So it's got to be numerical methods. So that could mean goal seek, but I want my model to work for the bonus question, or the not even technically bonus question, but for the last question that requires you to run a bunch of different scenarios. So I don't want to do manual goal seek, although it would work to goal seek in this scenario because there isn't any circularity, but I want to do better than that. And so what I'm going to do is a function to work this out. So to do that, I have a lambda that I wrote. No Copilot, I do not want your help on this. Which, let's just take a look at this. It's called find zero, and it's just, the idea is just a bisection. So it's a little more spaced out than I'd ideally like. So you give it a start range, which would be something like from 0 to 1 in this case. You give it a function which determines is this function positive or negative at this value, and you give it a number of steps you want to go. And then you start with that start range, you go a certain number of steps, and at each step you evaluate the function at the middle of the range, and if that's positive, then you shift to the left-hand side of the range, and if it's negative, you shift to the right-hand side of the range. Because the idea is you start with a value at the start of the range that makes it negative, a value at the end of the range that makes it positive. And so, if you have a positive here, it means you can shrink to this side. If you have a negative here, it means you can shrink to that side. And that's all it does. And it calls itself, over and over and over again. So to use that, we just need a function that will say, for a given percentage, how much, are we over or under this balance when we get to the end? So what's that going to look like? Well, this is where we come back to our kind of fun with present values. So let's do this. We're going to reduce, starting from a value of 0, through 24 steps, because we've got 24 steps in the period. Or actually, let me think. Can we? Yeah, we can just do it as through our draws. So here's our 24 draws. And I guess, sorry, let's let percent be, start off with 50%, I guess. And then we want to reduce through this. And what do we want to say? We want to say lambda AV. So we'll take the accumulated value so far, which is, the balance you've accumulated up to some point in time. We're going to roll that forward by taking a certain amount of interest on that. So that's going to be 1 plus the interest rate. It's going to be my modified interest rate here. But we're only paying debt's percentage of that, so times the percentage, because some portion of the interest gets paid by equity. And then we're going to add the new value, but again, only debt's percentage of that. So that doesn't look great. Oh, that's just because I screwed around with the formatting. So you can see if we start off at 0%, debt pays nothing, equity pays everything. That's all going wrong. If we start off at 100%, that is, oh, sorry. So the red flag for me there was that this number should have been the same as this number, and it's not, because I did not divide by 12. So I don't apply the entire interest rate to every monthly rollover, I just apply a 12th. And now that is the same as that number. So this is the scenario where I said all future draws, the value of those accumulated to the end of construction time. But now if I put in a value in between, like 50%, then we get that. So now what I want is actually to sort of convert this into a function. So I'm going to say let, we'll call it, I don't know, check func, be lambda of percent, give me all this stuff, minus this target here. Sorry, where did I close? Lambda percent reduce initial value array function. So that's the end of the reduce. So sorry, there. So that's the end of the lambda. And then let's just try check func of 0. Means that I'm under by this much because I have 0 balance. Check func of 1. So it's negative at 0, positive at 1. That's all I really need. So now we're going to find 0 of 0, 1, check func, and we're going to do 40 steps. So the logic for the 40 steps is the range starts off as being 1 wide, and every time we cut it in half, we either go to the left-hand half or the right-hand half, which means every time we divide the size of the range by 2. So 2 to the power of 10 is just over 1,000. So 10 steps of this gets you to 1,000th. 40 steps of this gets you to a trillionth. It basically gets you accurate to 12 decimal places. So I guess you could make that 50 and you'd say, well, that's 15 decimal places, which is as accurate as Excel ever gets anyway. And so why is that not formatted as a percent? Oh, because I was screwing around with it in between. So then I guess we'll say if construction again, just to keep it neat. If construction, then that, otherwise 0. Why is my format gone weird? Okay, never mind. So then finally we have one active scenario, which is this is the particular one for here. So we'll just say equals xlookup the active scenario in the list of scenarios returning from the list of percentages. Okay, so pretty long setup, but now that we've done all that, the follow through should be very, very quick. So loan opening balance starts off at 0. Can't really tell if I've made that red because of my dash formatting, but I'm going to make it red anyway. It's a good habit. So then the draw is going to be the total equity plus debt draw amount from up here times the percent to senior, which right now is 0 because we're doing senior last. Then the capitalized interest is going to be it's going to be the opening balance times we're going to say if construction, because we only capitalize during construction, then it's the opening balance times the interest rate. Times debts share. Because in a scenario where we're doing pari passu, then some of the interest gets paid by equity. Otherwise 0. Then the payment is going to be we can just say if the debt service is positive, because that means that we are in operations, not construction, and we're not in the tail period because we've already factored both of those into debt service. So if debt service is greater than 0, then it's going to be minus debt service plus the interest paid, which we will calculate in a minute, and otherwise 0. And then closing is just going to be the sum of all those. Opening, I'll carry on from closing, and we eventually borrow some money, and we eventually pay it back, and we are horribly, horribly wrong. Why are we so wrong? That's an interesting question. Oh, because I haven't calculated interest paid yet. Fine, sorry. Stupid. Okay, so first we have if we're in construction, then we need the equity share, which is going to be 1 minus that amount. And if we're in operations, then we just need the opening balance times the applied interest rate. And shazam! Accurate to many decimal places. Our loan is exactly paid off at the end of the pre-tail period, at the end of the loan period, whatever. It's paid off when it's meant to be paid off, is what I'm saying, incoherently. All right, so now we have to figure out our equity cash flows. So we're going to start with our CFADs. There's a whole waterfall given in the question, but I've basically reproduced it here. Now, the split of fees, meaning including arrangement and commitment and interest here, is going to be not correct because of the way that I've shunted around made up interest. So if you needed to answer specific questions on that, which I don't think you did in this question, but in real life, obviously, you could rebalance and fix those, but I don't need to for this, so I'm just going to carry on. So the draws is the draw times 1 minus the active percent. CapEx, yes, good. Then interest paid is, and sorry, this is negative to equity, obviously. So we carry that across. Then the interest is going to be minus this. Carry that across. The principal payment is going to be the payment from up here. Carry that across. The DSRA release, I think I modeled that up here. Yes. What sign did I give it as the next question? It has a negative sign, so I want minus that. The DSRA release is good. Give us money. Okay, and these two together. Yes, was our max debt service, which is equal to that. Okay, good. And then, oh yeah, so the DSRF didn't come into the sizing anywhere, but the idea of the DSRF is basically the committed amount, rather than just being this 330, will be increased by the amount of the largest 6 monthly debt service amount. Obviously in your model where everything works, you never expect to draw on it, but you still have to pay an arrangement fee on that and a commitment fee on that. But those are always funded out of equity, regardless of everything else above. So, long way of saying, here's our arrangement fee times the max of, first thing I need look at that, I left it there from before. I need a flag for is DSRF active. So we're going to say if this, then the arrangement percent times the max of the debt service, which is here, otherwise 0. And then something sort of kind of similar, which is the commitment fee percent lock times that and divided by 12, because this is, sorry, not divided by 12, but rather multiplied by the allocation here. We're in February, because that is going to be divided by 12 for the construction period and divided by 2 for the operation period. Yes, I can speak. Okay, so then finally we add all those together, we get our net cash flows, and we calculate an equity IRR, XIRR of these values and these payment dates. Everything is end of a period. And I guess I had it in a different cell before because I did definitely have my formatting somewhere. Nope, I did it. Okay, I don't know what I did with it. Never mind. Format percent to 4 decimal places. 8. I'm just going to check here's one I made earlier that I haven't stuffed this up. 88387. Hooray. Okay, so that's the main model. Very quickly, the scenarios. This is going to be mostly here's one I made earlier. So the scenario question was you had to choose the club of 3 of these 10 banks that would give you the best equity IRR. Now, my intuition on this, which turned out to be not worth crap, was that the drawdown order would be the biggest driver. And so I thought, okay, well, there's only two that let you do senior first, and you have to take the worst of three terms. So we're going to have to take something bad. But I figured the first thing I would do would be remove any of the senior last options, and then maybe remove the DSRA options and have the DSRA. Anyway, turns out, don't try to vibe it because this is a complicated question. But anyway, came back to it later, and here's a more kind of complete approach. Not a totally complete approach, which I'll explain in a second, but started with per-com Bose excellent formula. So this gives me all the different combinations of the numbers, of three numbers from 1 to 10, where order doesn't matter, so it's always in ascending order. Then what I'm basically calculating here is, can this club give a big enough loan? So I'm taking the loan limit here, just indexing the list of limits by all these numbers, and then taking the sum of those by row, so that these three banks can give you 440 million, these three banks can give you 480, these can give you 400 million. This is the rate during operations and the number of months in the tail and the debt service coverage ratio, and from those we can calculate the maximum we can borrow based on repayment. So there are some cases where, here for example, based on a 4.75% rate during construction and a 60-month tail and a 1.6 debt service coverage ratio, the most you can afford to pay back is 290, but the most they will lend you is 285. I just assumed that those ones were not going to work because the instructions were not really complete on how to deal with those. So it said, if there's not enough, just borrow up to this amount and then fund the rest through equity. But in my mind, that's not a complete explanation, because that explains what goes on in the construction period. But over here, you've got more cash flow available than you need. So just like you could do the borrowing equity first, or a senior loan first, or pari passu, or whatever, the extra capacity you have in the system here could be allocated in lots of different ways. Like, the most favorable to equity would be to say, if you've borrowed 30 million, if you borrowed 30 million less than you can afford to pay back, then just pay everything out to equity for the first few periods, and then start paying back. But I don't know that banks would allow that. And anyway, so I just ignored those. I figured, in any case, borrowing more is generally better for your equity IRR. So borrowing as much as you can plausibly seems like the best way to go. So I calculated a repayment limit. I'm just doing it as a kind of dynamic thing here because I like things to be dynamic, but we're just saying sum of the cash flow available for debt service, drop the number of periods that is the tail divided by 6, divide that by the debt service coverage ratio, that's your debt service payments, then divide that by 1 plus rate over 2, which is your 6-monthly rate, to the power of, which is just getting present value. So yeah, this is basically discounting all those future debt service payments based on the interest rate back to the end of the construction period. Then for the code, I just said, if you can borrow enough, then give me the code, which is, so like here, for example, this 123, I would enter as 111 and then 7 zeros to get, sorry, I put it in, yeah, that's the one I already have in up here, to get banks 1, 2, and 3. So come back up here. Let's come down again. So then I just filtered for the ones that are not NA. These are the plausible codes. So out of the 120 combinations of 3 banks, there are 106 that you can work with, like that. And then I'm just going to make this my variable input cell and calculate. Sorry, that might be pointing to the wrong place. So it's right, I had an F, that's why I wasn't picking up the format. So that's already calculated, super. And then here I'm just, converting this back into which banks do I get. So I think that the best equity IRR you can get is 9.94% from Santander, Helena, and Ozbank. And that is the whole question. And that is the whole question in less than an hour, which is an awful lot faster than it took me to do a much worse job of it first time round. But so it goes. That's all I got for today. I will be back later in the week with my live solve of the first two questions because I actually did a good job of those, unlike this one. And then then we've got through, serious, real life modeling phase. I'm going to go back to playing games for a while. But that's all I got for now. See you soon.